Alright, suppose you're asked to compare which fraction is the biggest, or put the fractions in ascending order or descending order or anything like that. It's not, there's lots of ways you can ask for the same question, or put whichever sign between the two fractions. The only way you can compare fractions is making equivalent fractions with the same denominator. You can't compare halves and thirds. Well, you can. You could draw them. You could say, well, if I take a bar, well, that's half, and if I divide it into thirds, well, that's a third, and therefore a third is smaller than a half. But that's a very time-consuming way to compare fractions. So what you need to do is you need to have a way of doing it that means that you don't have to draw pictures all the time. So what we want to do is we want to find something that has a common denominator with halves, thirds and fifths. So we're looking for making equivalent fractions that have all of those numbers as factors. So what we're looking for is the lowest common multiple of 2, 3 and 5. Now there's an easy way to do this. There's a very easy way of finding a common multiple. In fact, we actually don't even need the lowest in this case. A common multiple will do. If you think about it, 2 times 3 times 5, which is 30, will always be a common multiple, won't it? Because a half, 2 goes into 30 because I've multiplied 2 by 15. 3 goes into 30 because I've multiplied 3 by 10. So if you multiply the denominators together, you will always get a common multiple. But be careful, when we get along to adding fractions, you have to simplify at the end. Okay, so don't spend ages trying to find the lowest common multiple. Just, you can always multiply them together. So we need to make a half into 30ths, a third into 30ths, and 2/5 into 30ths. So to get from 2 to 30, I have to multiply the denominator by 15, which is what I need to do at the top, so it's 15/30ths. To get from 3 to 30, I multiply them by 10, multiply the top by 10, so that's 10/30ths. To get from 5 to 30, I multiply them by 6, so that's 12/30ths. And then quite clearly, you can see from that what the order is. If we were asked to put this in ascending, smallest to biggest order, it would be 10/30ths, 12/30ths and 15/30ths, which if you were actually asked to put those fractions in ascending order, you'd need to go back and actually write the original fractions. So 10/30ths was the same as 1/3, 12/30ths was the same as 2/5, and 15/30ths was the same as a half. Alright, so the only thing you really need to remember is that you have to put them with common denominators before you compare them. If you don't put common denominators, you end up in trouble. Another way you might see a question is what sign goes between 2/7 and 4/9. Which sign goes between those two fractions? What you need to think about is making equivalent fractions to start off with. We know a common denominator, so the common denominator will be 7 times 9. That will always be a common denominator. If I multiply my two denominators, that will always give me a common denominator. And once again, actually in this case, it's also the lowest common denominator. But that doesn't matter when you're comparing fractions. In fact, it doesn't matter ever, provided you simplify at the end. Okay, so lowest common denominator is 63. So we've got 2/7, I've got to write that in terms of 60/3. I've got to multiply that by 9, that by 9, so that's the same as 18 60/3. And 4/9, how many 60/3 is that? I've got to multiply by 7, so that's 28 60/3. So the sign, if we had 2/7 and 4/9, which one's bigger? Quite obviously the 4/9 is bigger, so we use a less than sign. So we say 2/7 is less than 2/7 is less than 4/9. Alright. So you've got to be really careful. The only thing you actually need to remember is always compare by putting them over a common denominator. Don't try and guess. All right, if you try and guess, you will get it wrong. Any questions about comparing fractions, Darcy?
When you need to find the lowest common denominator, it's like the easiest to time.
Yeah, that's right. If you multiply the two denominators, you will always get a common denominator. Always. You can sometimes pick easy ones. Suppose we had, 3/12 and 1/24. I want to know what sign to put between those. I wouldn't multiply 12 and 24 because I get a huge number and I'll make mistakes if I have to get into those really big multiplications. It's pretty obvious from this case that the lowest common denominator will be 24 because both 12 and 24 go into 24. So the only one I actually need to make an equivalent fraction from is the 3/12. And I make that into 24ths. So that's the same as 6/24. So obviously that's bigger than 1/24. So I wouldn't always multiply because if you multiply 12 and 24, you're probably going to stuff it up. But if you're a bit smart about how you do it, you won't. All right.